This is episode number 223, hard to believe, with the great Thomas Jefferson Kitts.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called plein air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Rhoads.
Well, thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the PleinAir Podcast. I'm Rhoads. It has been a fun couple of weeks. It's been fun because I love hanging out with my friends. I love hanging out with other artists. I love painting with other artists. And the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of really great artists here staying in the world famous artist cabin. And that gives me a chance to hang out with them, go to dinner, go painting. And so it's been really a great couple of weeks. Artists that have been here this last 2 weeks is Barbara Tapp, watercolor artist, and Ian Stewart, watercolor, just brilliant watercolor artists, both of them. And so this has been kind of a watercolor time for me, which is kind of fun, actually, because I am trying to learn how to be a better watercolorist, which, of course, leads me to Watercolor Live. We'll talk about that in a minute. So we are really honored that you guys are tuning in, and we're humbled. I know that's hard to believe that I might be humbled. No, really. But we are now number one 2 years in a row on the FeedSpot list of painting podcasts online. So that's pretty cool. Thank you so much for making that happen. And coming up after the interview with great Thomas Jefferson Kitts, we're going to talk a little bit about marketing, including about TikTok marketing and marketing advisors, and if you need one or not. So that's going to be in this week's Marketing Minute. I should mention that this is coming out right before Christmas. So Merry Christmas to everybody. We hope that you get some good time with your family and some downtime and some joy in your life. That's all very important. If you're looking for last minute gift ideas, I actually have some that don't actually have to be shipped. Okay. You can put little cards together, right? So the first one is PleinAir magazine. If you're into plein air, then give your loved ones the hint that, gee, I'd sure love to have a print or digital or both subscription to PleinAir magazine. And it's the digital, of course, has got about 30% extra content in it. So just go to pleinairmagazine.com for that. And if you would like to go to the Plein Air convention, that's a bigger hint. Plein Air convention is in Denver this year, and it's going to be wild. And what's really going to be wild is everybody's trying to guess who our big celebrity announcement is going to be. We actually have a world-renowned celebrity. And everybody's guessing it wrong so far, which is kind of fun to watch. And we are not allowed to announce it yet. But once we do, and it's going to be right around the corner, I think, because we had to kind of wait till the end of the year because of some movie deals and things. But anyway, I think that we should have final confirmation here any minute. But anybody who's at the Plein Air convention, who's part of the VIP program, which has special seating and snacks and all this other stuff, they're going to get a chance to meet this person. So that's going to be cool and have a chance to get their photo with them. And of course, Watercolor Live is coming up. If you want to master watercolor, and I am really working hard on mastering watercolor because I just don't want to drag my oils everywhere I go. I just, like business trips, I'm taking watercolor and I'm really starting to love it and really get good at it. Good is a relative term. I'm not good like some people, but I am really getting to the point where I'm feeling proficient and feeling good about it. And that's because of Watercolor Live, which is a 3-day event that I believe is going to take you from that feeling of, insecurity in your work and maybe not feeling good enough to feeling like you can be confident and doing a great job with your work. And just after 3 days, yes, I know that seems impossible. Of course, you have to practice after that and get good, but you will learn all the principles from like about 30 different top master artists in that 3 days. And there's an optional beginner's day if you're new to watercolor or you just want a refresher, and a lot of really great artists on that too. So that's at watercolorlive.com. Now, today, my guest is Thomas Jefferson Kitts. We've become pretty good friends over the years. We've encountered each other at a lot of events. He is a really terrific artist who's inspired by light, the way that light plays off of other things. And he loves to work directly from life. He loves to work alla prima, if you will. And of course, he's done several things like Study Sergeant and Soroya and Zorn. And we need to do a video on Zorn, but he's done videos for us on painting like Sargent, painting like Soroya. I guess it's time for Zorn. Anyway, Tom is an observational painter. He paints mostly in plein air and has done so for 33 years before the term plein air was even bantied about very much. This whole movement is, primarily the last 20 years or so. Anyway, let's welcome Thomas Jefferson Kitts. Hey, Tom.
Hey, how you doing, Eric?
I am perfect in every way except for those few things that I'm missing. And Tom, I guess it's time for a Zorn video.
Wow, you're pitching that hard.
Yeah. Well, you can't say no when we're on camera or on audio, right?
Right. I get your technique. I do. I will say that I think that of the three you mentioned, the Sargent and Soroya and Zorn, in my opinion, Zorn is probably the most technically difficult to pull off.
Yeah, I would agree.
I'm open to the idea. We should talk about it. But,
yeah, we should. Have your lawyer call.
That's why I put it on the last of that list. So just
have your agent call me.
Yes,
so,
you'll be hearing from my wife shortly. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
I don't want to deal with her. Thank you very much. I know she's tough. She's tougher than you. So let's just, while we're on that topic,
Okay.
and I didn't intend this to be, hawking your videos and so on, but what I thought was really cool when we worked together on the Zorn or on the Soroya project, you went to great length in preparation. We see that very rarely. I mean, a lot of people do a lot of preparation, but you hired a model, you brought her out to the ocean, you photographed her.
Yeah.
You went through this entire process of really trying to mimic what Zorn would do and then showing his entire process based on your interpretation and your study. I thought that was pretty cool.
Thank you. Soroya, by the way, not Zorn, because we haven't done Soroya yet.
Did I say Zorn again?
You did, but you know what? Don't worry about it. But I would say that, yeah, that was a big risk for me. I probably dropped a good $3,800 just to fly down, hire the model, get the cameras I needed. And I had about 15 minutes to shoot at the end of the day at the shore. Had no idea if it was going to come together or not, except I hoped it would, but it paid off, as you said. I've always believed as an ex-illustrator, if you have good references, you can make good paintings. If you don't have good references, it's kind of a toss of the dice.
Well, how much of your painting life would you consider to be studio versus being outdoors?
That's a great question.
It is a great question. Thank you for that.
Well, because of the lead up, I think some people think maybe that's all I do is on plein air outdoors. Actually, no, we can talk about this later if you want, but I'd say it's maybe 50-50 at this point this week right now. I do a lot of studio stuff. I do paint from, that's a studio piece I take that back. That's a plein air piece.
You're not supposed to refer to the images for the video audience, remember?
Yeah. Sorry. Anyway, I paint indoors a fair amount, either from life or from a decent photo reference. And also I'll go out and paint outside just to get the notes and the color and the value relationships and then bring it back in, especially if I'm doing a big painting. The small stuff, I'd rather do that on site.
Well, I think one of the things that I really am fascinated with is that I have watched so many people who have been studio painters their whole life and have never gone outdoors, never wanted to, never thought the whole thing was ridiculous and a waste of time and dealing with the elements outdoors and the mosquitoes and everything. It is so fascinating for me to see how much their work actually changes once they start going outdoors.
Oh, I think I totally agree. Um, when you paint to the photograph, and that's my way of putting it, then you're limited to what you see in that photograph and what that photograph is providing. And there's just no way a photo can give you as much information as your own eyes. The hardware is incomparable, basically. Plus, when you go outside or when you're painting from life, basically observational painting, as you mentioned, you're looking at the world with stereo vision, and you're looking at the world with changing points of focus. This gets kind of geeky, but the bottom line is you realize that those two things, the stereopic vision and the fact that you're sort of looking at bits and pieces within your focus, is a completely different experience. It produces a completely different image than working from a flat photograph.
Now, I know people like you who can take a photograph, even if they don't go outside and get any color notes or whatever, and make
Mhm.
it feel like it's outdoors. How long does it take? How much outdoor painting does it take till you get to that point where you can kind of really mimic the outdoors from a photograph?
Well, that's a good question. Again, I think that's a different answer for other people. I think that once you start to see what happens in shadows and what happens in the lights, then you can take that indoors and work from the photograph and invest. If that's not in the photographic reference, you can invest that knowledge that you got outdoors into your photo reference.
Yeah. I
But I
find,
would I would point out something. For
yeah,
example, most of the paintings by Monet that we venerate, the big ones, those didn't happen entirely outdoors. He would go out, paint them, start them outdoors, bring them back in the studio, work them, then take them back outdoors and paint them, and then bring them back in the studio over, in some cases, the course of years.
and
So,
do you think he used any photographs?
there's been a recent argument about that. I think he was completing one of the parts, well, one of the parliament painting procedures of the English Parliament, very, very moody, mystical. And apparently, he took a couple of those paintings that he thought were unfinished on a trip to Norway and finished them up there. And I think the argument is whether or not he took photos with him. It's not an argument I want to get into personally,
Does it
myself.
matter?
Less than most people seem to think, because there are diehard people who say you can't use any potential device to make a better image. But you're talking to, like I said, an old dog illustrator where it was like anything for a buck. How can we shorten the timeline? What's the quickest way to get to the finish that I'm going to pass off to an art director? So, mm, I mean, when I go out to paint from life, I want to see life. I want to see it. That's why I'm there. But if I am having to work on a painting where it does come indoors for me to finish or launch even a big piece, that's okay too. It's
Well,
okay
what
too.
I'm curious about, I find this to be very difficult still, and that is, first off, I've gotten to the point where I really don't want to use photographs, and I'll do a big painting from a small study, which is
Sure.
what a lot of people think studies were intended for originally, anyway.
Yeah.
And a lot of people still do that. But I find that the temptation in the studio, for whatever reason, maybe it's because you don't have the clock and the blowing wind and the things that are distracting you. I find that I
Yes.
tend to over render things when I'm working in the studio. If I'm working from in any case, how do you maintain that same energy that you would get from a plein air piece, or do you need to?
I think you do need to. Um,
Okay.
you're bringing up such great points for anyone who paints. That is both the luxury and the danger of working from a fixed reference, i.e., a photograph, let's say, is that you do think you can get up and go get a coffee break, you come back, or you might just put it away for a couple of days, let it dry so you can do something. And I've noticed in my own work that when I'm working, let's say from a reference, I tend to, the longer I paint on the painting, the more it becomes the reference. And the less it becomes an expression of myself.
Can you say
So
that a different way?
sure, it's kind of vague, I understand, but the longer I work on a painting using a reference, because the reference doesn't change, the more my painting ends up drifting towards being a facsimile of that reference.
I see, flat and lifeless or overly
Well,
rendered or
really rendered, maybe overworked. There's not a lot of improvisational kind of stuff going on because I'm killing that, slowly strangling it as the longer I work the painting. So to answer the question you asked at the front end of this is I often give myself a time limit saying, okay, I need to produce in X number of hours. It may not be 2 or 3 like I would if I'm outdoors, but I might be saying I'm not going to put 36 hours into this. I'm going to put 12.
so
And
Jove Wang always talks about if you're doing a small painting, use a big brush, and if you're using a big painting, use a small brush.
that'd be fun.
How, how do you feel about that?
I absolutely I see why he says that. I mean, I'm
What
not
do you do?
so well, I vary. I mean, people are always asking me, how do I paint? And it's like, well, today I paint
Yeah.
like this. I like what Joe said, and I see and understand what he's saying. I am tempted sometimes to work with a small brush. It gives you a different kind of quality. It depends what I'm going for stylistically. But then I also love the convenience and speed of working with a larger than normal brush as
Yeah.
long as possible. In fact, I don't think you knew about this, but I just finished up an online workshop on brushwork. We discussed this very matter, working from big brushes to small brushes and what they do.
Well,
But I want to say,
fascinating.
I'm going to add, I'm sorry to talk over you, but I'm going to add on top of this that when I start a painting, no matter whether it's indoors or out, I don't have any preconceived notion of where it's going. There's not a process that I'm now applying to get to the end result. It's more exploratory than that.
Well, one of the things that I think is kind of fun
Mhm.
and probably a little bit distracting is that I'm all over the road. Like,
Yeah,
I get bored doing the same thing over and over again. Do you find that
me
that
too.
you try to maintain a Thomas Kitts painting style, or one day you're emulating Sorolla and the next day you're emulating Picasso? What
Yeah,
do
I
you
haven't
find
done
yourself
Picasso
all
yet,
over
but
the
it's on
map
my list. Picasso's on my list. Okay.
on
Um,
your what kind of list?
It was to learn what he was doing because I really do love and respect what he did. I mean, a lot of people in our genre, in our sort of community, they poo-poo the modernists and specifically Picasso. And it's like, no, you got to understand a little more than that. Let's go a little deeper. I love Picasso. I love all those people. I just don't paint like them. But
Yeah,
there are things I could learn from them, clearly.
absolutely.
So,
Well,
um,
and especially,
yeah.
you can learn something from every painter out there. And you look at
Mhm.
something like a Rauschenberg.
A
If you
favorite.
just sit there and stare at those things, there's an awful lot you can learn about brushwork and a lot about texture and form. So,
Yes. Since you brought that up, I mean, on the fact sheet that I sent out to y'all before this, I listed one of the abstract expressionists as one of my favorite sources of inspiration, and that's
and who
Franz
would that
Klein.
be?
Franz Klein, German American, very expressive. I think I even sent a photo, but who knows? Anyway, the bottom line is, what I love about his work is it's action painting. The guy's putting his shoulder into the marks he makes, and he paints at a scale that's often like 9 by 10 or 6 by 10 feet. They're non-objective. You look at them and you don't see there's nothing there. It's not connected to reality in any other way, but it's about the paint and what the paint will do on these giant house brushes. Now, if you look at it in small size, like if you look at it on a screen or in a
Yeah.
history book,
Uh-huh.
it doesn't engage you the way it does when you see it monumentally
Yeah,
in its
because
original
when you
form.
see it in person, it kind of envelops you. It's like a big giant hug or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. And I've heard people
Something.
say, "Oh, my kid could paint like that," and I'm going, "No, they can't. That just means you need to look more
Yeah.
because your kid can't paint like that." Hell, sorry for saying that, but I can't paint like that. And I got almost 60 years in.
Yeah.
So, I
You're
just
that
come to it with
old?
some humility
Wow.
is what I'm saying. When you look at the modernists, come to it with some humility.
Well, and this is, this is we probably don't even want to open the door to that whole discussion, but it is a discussion that, a lot of people don't get it, don't understand it, and a lot of people feel like we're cretins for not understanding it. So I think,
Yeah, and I
there's
think
a
both are
whole
rather
lot.
extreme positions to take. You're right. I mean, there are
Yeah.
people who look at what you and I love and what we venerate, that sort of on plein air, observational based paintings that often convey a narrative, or there are people who look at that and say, well, that's old school. That's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's done. Well, that's fine. If they think that way, that's fine. Okay.
Well, I
I'm not
love
going
it
to argue with
all,
that.
and what I love is when people are combining the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
To look at that, and we're seeing more of this than ever, to see that abstract nature and that abstract brushwork and abstract shapes in representational paintings. When you're back 30 feet, they are really wonderful. You get close on them, you got all these like crazy marks. It's so much fun. So
Absolutely, and I think there's a race. I do. I think there's a race right now in the world of our peers that paint representationally, and ranging from realism to sort of heavily interpreted, but realism. There's a
yeah.
race right now to see how abstract we can all go without losing our audience, and I think that's great. That's a
Well, and
healthy
maybe it
thing.
gains a new audience though. You never know.
Yes. Yeah, I think, to turn this back on me, if you take a painter like Franz Klein and you look at enough of his work, and then you go and look at my work, you're going to see it. Because what I do when I go outside into the landscape, even more so in the landscape, is I'm trying to extract the abstraction. I'm not necessarily trying to end up with an abstract painting. And there's a difference between abstraction and abstract expressionism. It's a question of degree. But I'm just saying that when I go out into the landscape, I'm looking not to paint the tree, the rock, the mountain, the snow, the barn, the lady in the white dress with the parasol in the wind, although all that's kind of nice too. I'm not out there to paint that. I'm out there to find the concrete abstraction of what I'm looking at. And the fact
So
that it looks like,
how do you teach yourself to do that?
it's been a process, because when I started doing this, I was an iconoclastic literal painter, and I really rendered a lot that came from
Yeah.
my background.
Yeah.
And it's only maybe in the last 15 years that I've tried to let go of drawing things out and rendering things out, and just looking at the shape, the value, the color, the edges, the thickness of paint. These are abstract terms I'm using. They don't sound difficult, but those are the things I look for when I look at life in general.
I
The
think
fact,
that
let me finish the
oh, yeah,
fact.
yeah.
Yeah, the fact that I end up with a painting that looks like something is literally just, I don't care about that. And that's just where it goes. I'm not trying to make a woman sipping a cup of tea, and reading in sunlight, but that's where it's going to go if that's what I'm looking at. But I'm not seeing that. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Sounds
I think
weird.
that has to be a matter of experience, because I remember when I did the first Publishers Invitational, there was like 12 or 15 of us.
Mhm.
And one of the artists was really trying to help me break my, almost photo representational little tiny brush strokes of everything.
Sure,
And
sure.
I just, I felt almost accosted, because I couldn't understand it. And now I completely get it. And I just try to break it. I try to get those crazy brush strokes and movements into things. And I fight to get it. And everything to me now is so much more pleasing once I've kind of moved in that direction. But I could not embrace it in the early time. And I think part of it is just that I got bored with what I was doing.
I think
And
that's pretty common. I agree.
it, because if you watch the track of a lot of artists, not all artists certainly, but you'll see a lot of artists as they get further and further along in their life and their careers, they really start breaking things, and they try to experiment with things. I mean, you're a great example of that. C.W. Mundy,
Yeah.
as he
Yeah.
was getting uh, super more and more abstract. I didn't think his work could get any better, and yet now he keeps pushing it and trying, experimenting and breaking things and getting better.
Yeah.
And I just think it kind of tends to be a natural progression. And if you even look at some of the early stage modernists, I mean, they kind of started out very representational and then just kept
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries, and it's kind of fun.
It is. And it's not inevitable. It's not that that's what every artist is going to end up doing, but
No,
I
of
do
course not.
think many do, because as you say, they get kind of bored. They feel they've mastered the illusion of realism. And that's how I put it, the illusion, because essentially we are taking a two-dimensional surface off to just white, and we're adding shapes and colors and blah, 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 all that to it to create the illusion of something. Well, at some point, some artists, they've mastered that, or they feel they have. And that's what happened to me. It's like, oh yeah, I can make this look like that, and I can get everyone to agree this looks like that. But now I'm interested, what's next? What do I want to do? What's the challenge? Can I make the paint more apparent and still get people to say that looks like that? But now they're looking at more expressive paint. That's where I've gone in the past 10 years.
Is it scary at all?
No, because I'm a fool. I know how to make money, and I drive my galleries crazy, because when they call me up because they just sold something which they think is the best thing I ever did because they just sold it,
Yeah,
and they say, "Can you send me another?" And I go, "Yeah, sure." And then I send them something different.
To that point, I remember, I won't use names, but I remember this artist that we both know is a very good artist, decided to completely depart from what he was known for doing.
Yeah,
And he did this show at a major gallery in a big city, and nothing sold. It's like all of his people were there because they loved and supported him and wanted to collect more of what they were used to getting,
yes,
and the whole show bombed. And I thought that was a pretty risky thing that he did, and he eventually found a new audience for all of that stuff, and then it all eventually sold, and he kind of moved into another direction. But sometimes you have to take bold action like that, and
mhm.
it is a little scary and a little bit risky. I think, especially if your income is relying on it.
I think that's true, and that is a risk. I am not somebody who's independent of making money. Got to make money, no question. But at the same time, I have to be engaged. And as you know what, as our friend Lori Putnam says, nothing is more obvious than boring in a painting. You can tell when an artist is just kind of phoning it in, that they have pursued that line and they've maybe pursued it to the point where they're no longer engaged.
Yeah.
That's the time you have to change. You have to leave. Otherwise, why would you keep painting except to pay the rent,
Well,
which is valid.
well,
You
I
gotta pay
you
the
know,
rent.
I have friends who are in that place, and they're perfectly happy in that place, and they're making a great living, and
Yep,
they're painting the
yep,
same thing the same way that they did 30 years ago, maybe a little bit better, but that is just the place they want to be in. So I can't be
yeah.
critical
And
of that.
yeah, I want to make sure I don't sound like I'm denigrating that
No,
approach
you're not.
or those kind of people, because yes, there are people who find something, a niche, or they find a thing that they're doing, and it's just like the voodoo they do so well, and they get to do it for 30, 40, 50 years. So they really, really get to refine it. I get that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
you're talking to somebody who has ADHD. I'm lucky to get to the end of a painting, let alone an aura of work that somehow is connected to each other.
you
So
know what happens when you put two people with ADHD in a room?
no, tell me.
Nothing gets done. Just,
Well, I will
I can
say, I'll
relate.
throw this out. I'm self-diagnosed with that, but there's enough clues.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm also married to a psychotherapist.
Oh, that
She's
doesn't
convinced
hurt.
too. But where I'm going with this is the one skill that the ADHD brings to the mix here is, while they're easily distracted, they also, if they're not distracted, they are able to focus intently for long periods of time. And I can't think of a better description of an artist than someone who can focus intently for a long
Wait,
period of
wait,
time.
you're saying that with ADHD, you can focus intently?
Yeah, absolutely. You leave
I
me
thought the
alone.
opposite would be true.
Well, again, I'm not an expert in this, but I know how it works for me.
Huh,
I mean,
huh,
if you're in the room, if you're in the studio and I'm painting in the corner, I'm going to be tracking you as well as my brush, as well as, my dogs, as well as my wife who's upstairs making tea. But if nobody else is in the house, I am laser like in my focus.
Huh. Interesting to know. So we were talking a little bit about inspirations, and you talked
Sure.
about Plein. Who are some of the other artists? Were there any representational artists that really
Oh, yeah.
crank
Oh,
your
yeah.
clock?
Yeah, absolutely. More than we could have mentioned here, but I wanted to limit it to three.
Yeah.
Obviously, Sargent was an incredibly important early reference for me. And I think it was because of the abstraction. I was an undergrad learning illustration and design. So they were cramming a lot of abstraction in my head, not through paintings, but through graphic design. And so when I latched on to Sargent and I looked at his work, not so much the portraiture, which is great, grand portraiture, but the casual stuff or the things that he started to paint after he gave up portraiture, I would see this design, this energy, this effort, this sort of organizations. And I also see that Sargent would create problems for himself with his paintings and find ways to resolve or solve them.
Huh.
And that's something that if anyone looks at Sargent closely, you should be asking yourself, what problem did he set up for himself? It was a conscious thing that he did with placement.
Really? You think so?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we actually have him talking a little bit about that in some of the literature that exists on him. But I latched on to him early on because he combined paint, he combined design, he combined focus on light and effects. So that was important to me, especially when I really didn't feel confident about what I was doing at the time.
Well, Richard Ormond, his grandnephew, says that portraiture became his job. He hated portraiture. He hated doing all these society portraits, but it funded everything else. And so he did that. But the fun stuff for him was going out and painting landscapes and doing watercolors and just doing fun stuff. And then, when he finally got away from portraiture and all these big projects he had on his shoulders, then he went nuts.
Absolutely. That's why I tend to focus on the casual work, the landscapes or the portraits, not portraits, but sort of the genre paintings of people, the people in his life or people at work. It wasn't about a portrait. It wasn't about pleasing the client anymore. It was about an expression of life. So that was important to me at the get-go.
So how do you deal?
All right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I would say the next class of big influence to me was the Russian itinerants, which is a very short period in Russian art that after all the classes I took in art history, not one of them mentioned this group of painters. And we're talking about Levitan, we're talking about Shishkin, we're talking about Repin, we're talking about, too many Serov. Oh, yeah. When I saw that work and realized that I had never been exposed to it, it was never included in the great canon of great painting. And I looked at it, I just felt the penny drop. I can remember crying at some of their paintings that I saw because there was a connection to the realism that they would portray and the subjects, meaning this sort of life, often very harsh, brutal life, with naturalism, with thick paint, sort of expressive paint. All of this kind of work together. And then on top of that, the cherry on top of that is the actual landscape subject matter, the content was so like the world I live in. Literally, the world I live in is very much like these areas that they painted. And I just felt this is so cliche, but I felt heard for the first time. And this is like 86, when there wasn't a lot of representational painterly stuff going on.
Yeah.
But I looked at that and I thought, oh my God, this has already happened. These are my bros. Of course, I had no idea how they did any of this. And I'm always that kind of guy that wants to take apart the painting and say, well, how's the plumbing working on this particular picture? But I don't know.
I had a very similar experience, and I didn't know they existed until it was pointed out to me by a Russian art dealer who I met by accident. And then I kind of ended up going to Russia multiple times and seeing these things in person. And it was life-changing, really was. And I I can tell you stories I've told on this podcast of artists who were with me who, who cried or
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
realized that they might not ever be able to get to that level because it was a level higher than anything they'd seen in most cases. So
Yeah.
it just is it's spectacular. But I think the big difference as a starting point is the depth of training.
Oh, yeah.
These
Yeah.
people had more
Yeah.
training. I mean, you look at these guys, I my friend Nikolai Dubovik, who's a professor at the Sarakov Institute.
Oh, I'd love to meet that guy.
You have probably, maybe not. I had him at the first Plein Air convention. Anyway, he was put into a school for what they perceived as talented artists in second grade. The state adopted him, and he
Mhm.
was drawing from live models, unclothed live models in the second grade, and did that every year of his life until he was an adult. You don't you get pretty good when you do that. And then and part of their curricula was to put these people out, normally, you go to college and you get the summer off. In Russia, you go to college and then you have to spend the summer at their summer location, the academic dasha in the mid part of the country, where they have to paint plein air every day for, all summer. And they have to paint people outdoors in plein air. And I just think the entire experience is that starting point. But, very few are as good as Levitan or Shishkin or any of
Well,
the
true.
others that you mentioned. But
True
these
that.
people,
There's
the
yeah.
level that they get to, and you can't even see it in the books. When you see it in person,
Oh, I
the books
know.
are a great starting point. But when you see it in person, it's just like it's like this painting must weigh 500 pounds. It's
Oh,
so
yeah.
heavy, so
Yeah.
much paint.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the themes throughout my life, and I started off as a very thin painter because of the
Yeah,
illustration influence thing. Like I got
yeah.
to render this out, so I don't want too much paint my way while I'm rendering. But my whole career has been moving from thin to thick, and I don't think I've stopped. I haven't reached the thick point yet.
Huh,
But people look at the paintings now and they go, "That's a lot of paint," and I'm
thicker.
going, "Yeah, but we can go more. We can go
Yeah.
more." I love what Sargent said. No, put enough paint down so that you can push it around.
Huh.
And I do believe Repin said something to the effect of edges become interesting when there's thick paint. And so the only way to create those kind of things is to put more paint down.
Well, isn't
I've
that a
seen
common thing? When you're doing workshops, you
Mhm.
see people who are putting out these little tiny dabs of paint. They want to be frugal with it, understandably,
Yeah, I do.
but
It costs
you
money.
know, you really gotta get some paint out there.
Yeah, well, to mention another artist, I took a workshop from Ivanis Barbarian, a
Ah,
Russian-Armenian painter. You obviously know him.
yep.
Um, and I took that workshop just to see what happens when you paint thickly. And the first night we came in, we was going to do a demonstration of a 50 by 60 foot canvas, tinted gray. And he was in backstage, kind of waiting for his time to come out, kind of a showman kind of thing. But anyway, I walk over to his setup and I see this groaning board of still life. And I look at his palette, which is a big surgical metal palette that's probably 20 by 30 inches. And I looked at his piles of color. I kid you not. He had colors out there that occupied that much space. And we're talking maybe half inch to 3/4 of an inch tall. The guy
Hmm.
had like over $1,000 for this demo for our class that he was going to use. And the first thing he does, this is what cracks me up. The first thing he does is, I'm just amazed. I go sit down and wait for the guy to come out.
Yeah.
He walks out there, introduces himself, and he walks over to his palette. He picks up a big #2 brush like this. He proceeds to basically stir all that color like it's a batter and
Right.
corkscrewing it into the center. And I just freaked out. I thought, how much money was involved? And then I looked at what he did and I realized, oh, he just created like a crayon box. He just needs to pick up, put
Yeah,
down, pick
and
up,
it's all
put down.
marbled.
Yeah. And so in 2.5 hours, he completed this painting.
When
That's a lot.
we went to Russia and we shot, Nikolai Blokhin, the great Russian master, we
Mm,
did 2
right.
videos, one
Yeah.
drawing and one portrait, and he literally brought in a door, and he laid that door on a table. He had like 30 of them. He just gets old scrap doors. He laid it on that table, and he took those big tubes of paint, really big ones, and he'd squish everything out of that, and he'd do 2 or 3 piles on one color, and then he, the whole thing. And it just, it was really fun to see because he didn't worry about economy of paint, and then watching it push around, it's so fascinating.
Plus
So
the sort of the idea, if you just put a little finger, a little bit down, and then you cap your thing, and then you got to put more down. You uncap, then you have to cap it, then cap. That just interrupts the flow to me.
yeah, time waste.
So here's what I do. This is the tip that I learned from Ovanis, is that he would actually buy his paint in sort of, I think, plastic jars, big mouth jars.
Yeah.
And he would scoop out probably what you would consider almost 150 mil, like the big tube, down on the palette. And then at the end of the painting session, he would take whatever paint wasn't messed up and put it back in the jar.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's one of the most money-saving tips I've ever come across.
There's a company called Classic Oils in somewhere in California, and they sell paint in caulking guns.
Yes,
and
that's true.
Ken Oster used to take that caulking gun and put it out. It's pretty fascinating. I want to go down a different
piles of paint then, Ken Oster's.
Yeah. And he used a brush that was about, the head of the brush was about 3 feet. And
I will never, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you here, but I will never forget that first plein air convention when you had Ken come up to the stage and you took away his small scaled canvas and made him out of the blue paint on something that was closer to like 3 by 4 feet without any warning,
He was a little ticked off about that, but
well, he got over it when he realized, and he sold it to somebody who was going home, so he didn't have to worry about it. But I'm just saying,
I've spent my life wishing I had bought that painting because I had a chance to, and I didn't, and now he's gone. It's would have been fabulous. The path I was gonna go down is that I find that a lot of the people who do really brilliant work in plein air started out as illustrators. What is it about that discipline that those of us who never had the training and never had the experience of all those deadlines, et cetera, what is it about that?
I think it's a blessing and a curse. And I say that from personal experience. As I mentioned, I went to art school. I didn't feel confident enough to make a living as a fine artist. So that's why I chose to go to the illustration side. And in that school, if you did illustration, you also had the graphic design. And it was a great grounding. But what I did learn from illustration was you have to be able to draw. You don't actually have to use your drawing skill in a painting if you choose not to, but you need to have that choice. So illustrators generally are asked to focus on life drawing for one, or rendering. The rendering is kind of the curse in my opinion, because it took me years to kind of let go of rendering and just let the paint do what paint does instead of trying to make it do what you think it should do. That's another topic. But if you go into illustration, you are very focused on realism and you're focused on skill, draftsmanship. And that's what I feel I carried into my fine art efforts.
And so you probably had to spend time kind of untraining yourself in some of the areas where you were overly rendering.
Yeah, first I had to recognize that was a problem. That's kind of like, one of the 7 steps to AA. I think you have to recognize you have a problem.
12.
That's a terrible analogy, but the point is
probably
I had to see that this was holding me back. And this happened not because I realized it, but from something someone said to me 20 years ago. I was a little group of coffee clatch ladies who painted, and I loved going to hang out with them and having coffee and sort of using them as my focus group. They love that too. But anyway, the bottom line is I really paid attention to what they're saying. And one of the mavens there, because I was complaining about how my paintings right then seemed to die after a certain amount of time, they just give up the ghost. There's no life in them. And she stood up and said, Thomas, you know what your problem is? You want the whole world to know you can draw. Ooh. And I realized the wisdom of what she said. I was
Wow.
valuing drawing accuracy over the expressive qualities of paint, and that's where
Yeah.
the painting was dying.
Huh. Well,
So
that
now
was
I
that
will
was a
let I'm
profound
just gonna
moment.
it was a real aha for me, but I will now in my work, if the thing isn't quite exactly drawn correctly, I will think, well, does it need to be?
Yeah.
And if I do change it, does it kill the painting?
But um, yeah, I would assume your best advice or some of your advice to anybody who's starting out in this game is you got to learn to draw.
Oh yeah, and when I say learn, I teach drawing, and when I was instructor and chair at a fine art school, I taught drawing there. To me, drawing is not about rendering. It's not about making the hair look like there's little strands of hair and that there's, like a little eyelash you see there. Drawing to me is about shape and value, meaning the value relationships you give those shapes. So there's two steps. You have to get the shape at least approximate, if not close. And then the second step is you need to be able to assign the correct light dark to that shape in relationship to all the other shapes. If you do not do that, if you make something too dark or too light, it doesn't matter how accurate your shapes are, it won't read right. So there are two things. So when I teach drawing, I generally limit tools to soft line charcoal and newsprint and a kneadable eraser. And I've learned when I teach it that way, people get it really quickly. That still requires them to put hours into it. And here's my final pitch on this. Okay, this is not just me. This is not about me teaching, but it's really important for the student who's trying to learn to draw to tell themselves they're not making mistakes. They're making changes. You don't have to be right the first time. You just have to keep making it closer and closer and closer. And eventually you'll get something that looks like what you want.
Well, this kind of happens in society, these perceptions of I can't draw, there's something flawed with me, I don't have any talent. It's like, well, I
Talent.
couldn't do brain surgery until I learned how. I mean, it just was that, we, for some reason, we think that art is a natural talent and instead of a
Yeah.
learned skill.
I always substitute the word focus for talent.
Yeah.
Nobody is born knowing how to do any of this. And so much of what you and I do is essentially comes down to hand-eye coordination. And you only get that from sort of wiring your brain. And you get that wiring from in your brain from just repetition, doing things enough times that it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
And of course, art is not the only place this happens, but it does have to happen in art. I mean, I can tell you everything you need to know about all your materials and how to hold and how to, pull your arm. None of that is going to serve you better than just doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is your best, as we kind of wrap up here, what is your best advice to somebody who is kind of on the road? They're trying to kind of figure out how to either become a proficient plein air painter or painter at all, or maybe they want to kind of leap up and get a little, they're already past beginner stage, but they want to kind of climb the ladder and get to be more successful.
What are the 7 steps to plein air success? Is that what we're looking at here?
I don't need 7. I only need however many we need.
Yeah, well, maybe you can do it in 2. I don't know. You're exceptional. I guess that's a tough question to answer because I think a lot of people, when they start out, they have aspirations, which are good, essentially. Got to have it. You want to have some idea of what you're in pursuit of, and that's going to be a little different for everybody. And you may not know what are sort of sequences or steps or things I need to learn to get to that, but you just start.
Yeah, and you don't know what you don't know until you discover it when you're painting.
Absolutely. I was going to throw out a quote by John Cage, the minimalist composer we all know and love or hate because he wrote something called 3 minutes, 14 seconds of silence, and that was his big orchestral piece. I really love what he said. He just said, start anywhere.
I like it.
Don't worry so much about procedure. Just start.
Just start. Well, on that note, we're going to end. We're just going to end anywhere. We we could go on for hours. You know, I can talk forever, and we need to do that. But hey, thank you so much for doing this today. This has been fascinating. We're going to have you back because we haven't even touched on the beginning of what we really need to touch on. So we'll get you back, and we'll do this some more in the future.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much, Eric. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, it's always my pleasure to talk to you. Thanks, Tom.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Our guest is Thomas Jefferson Kitts. And that could have gone on forever because he's so good. And, he's just a wealth of information. And also, by the way, just a really great guy. So I think it's time now for us to go into the Marketing Minute to improve your art sales.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
In the Marketing Minute, my goal is to answer your questions, get you thinking about some things. And, the same stuff kind of comes up again and again and again because maybe this is rooted in a particular philosophy or approach. I don't pretend to do things the way everybody else does them. I don't want to be critical of those things. It's just how I'm different. If you have questions, though, you can send them to me, eric@artmarketing.com, or you can go to artmarketing.com/questions and record a video if you want to. All right. So Amadine, my producer, is going to ask the first question.
The first question is from Deb Price Kennedy from Centerville, Massachusetts. Should I hire a marketing specialist?
Should I hire a marketing specialist? Thank you, Amadine. Should I buy a new car? Should I drink a Coke at dinner? There's got to be more to the question. So I don't mean to be critical, Deb, but it's impossible to answer that question because I don't have any data points. And one thing that you will learn, or you might learn if you really get good at marketing, is that everything is about data points, right? Because you have data points that inform your decisions. In my world, it's like how many people opened up an email and how many people read that email and clicked on something. Those are data points. And you are always comparing one against the other, trying to better yourself and get those data points. I don't know why you would be asking the question, so I'm going to assume a couple of things. But I don't know what your situation is, and that's why I can't answer it for you exactly. But let's say, for instance, that you're an artist and you're making $10,000 a year, and I tend to use round numbers just to make it easy. And your goal is to get to $20,000. Well, when you think about it, that's doubling your business. That's a pretty big deal. Most people can't figure out how to double their business in 1 year. I've tried that many times. I've had a chance to do it a couple of times, but it's not exactly easy. But you have to ask yourself, let's assume I could go from $10,000 a year to $20,000 a year, how much would I pay to go to $20,000 a year? But, if I'm at 10 and I go to 20, how much would I pay to get there? Because that's kind of how a marketer thinks. Now, I would be looking at that and saying, would I be willing to pay 10,000 to get 10,000? And most people go, well, that's stupid. Why would you do that? And the reason is, let's say for the last 10 years, I've been doing 10,000 a year, and next year I do 20, but it costs me 10,000 to get that 20. But that's okay. I'm still at the 10,000 I had. But now my baseline, if I do 20,000 every year for the next 10 years, I've paid 10,000 to get myself to a $20,000 range, and it might be worthwhile. And that's where an advisor can help you. Now, most of us look for metrics that are not quite that extreme. So we might look and say, hey, to get 10,000, would I pay 10% of that? Absolutely. Would I pay 20%? Absolutely. Would I pay 50%? Maybe not as absolutely, but it depends on you. And of course, it depends on your costs and cost of delivering these paintings and all the other things that do that. But you'd be ahead of the game. And if I paid 10 grand to get to 20,000, and another 10 grand to get to 30,000, and another 10 grand to get to 40,000. If there was a way to do it, I would probably do it, because then you're getting your baseline higher. Now, I might say, what am I willing to pay for that 10 grand increase? And it depends. It depends on, is the advice good? Advice isn't cheap. Now, I charge $5,500 an hour for consulting. I try not to do it very much, and that's why I charge $5,500 an hour, because I don't have an hour very often. But it's time now for me to raise my rates, because now that I'm in demand, I have to get my rates up, because when you're in demand, you have to get your rates up. I had a watch company, it was Seiko actually, hired me as a consultant for them on a tech project, because I did that for a while. And they actually paid me enough money that they bought me a whole new house from that money. But the amount of money, which seemed like a lot of money to me, to them, it was like, hey, he 20x'd our business. It's certainly worth doing that. So that's the way you want to look at it, is what am I willing to pay? But the first thing you've got to start, you got to back up, because you're way ahead of yourself. The first thing is, like, what is my target outcome? Where do I want to be? Because target outcome makes a huge difference. Now, there's a lot of bogus, fraudulent, hypey art marketing and marketing advice out there, and a lot of it is just complete nonsense. In my particular case, I hope it's not nonsense, but most of it I've learned by doing it, and I made a lot of stupid and expensive mistakes learning it. But there are two answers to any problem. What are those two answers? It's two resources. You can either have the resource of time, or you can have the resource of money. If you're busy, like I tend to be, I don't have any time, but I have plenty of money. If I spend money to solve a problem, then I'm ahead of the game, because if I don't have to spend 3 months solving that problem, or 6 months, or a year, then I'm ahead of the game, right? So a lot of us don't have money. And so what we do have is we have time. You can oftentimes, if you don't have the money, you oftentimes have the time. You can spend time. So, like, I try to master things all the time. I want to learn things. I'm always taking courses. Sometimes they're courses that have nothing to do with anything I'm doing, just because I want to learn it. But if I want to master something, then I put aside some time. It might be a month, it might be 3 months, it might be 3 years, but I think anybody can master anything within about 2 years. And, if you focus all your time and energy on that, if you want to focus your time and energy on growing your business, then you can do that yourself. You don't need somebody else to do it. And I think anybody can change their trajectory in life, or their trajectory in business, in about 90 days. If you stop, you think about it, you come up with a plan, and you implement it, you can get there in a very quick amount of time. Now, I read like a madman. I buy courses. I buy lots of courses. I probably spent $5,000 or $7,000 on courses. I have people out there that buy a video from time to time to improve as a painter. And I have other people who buy every one that I put out there, and to see the difference that they're making in their work, because they're studying, they're really serious about it. So you could become an expert. The other thing you got to keep in mind is, what was true in marketing a year ago isn't even true today. Some of it is. There are some principles that never change, but there are things that are changing fast. And to be a pro, you have to invest your time to stay ahead of it. Now, why do I say that? If you're going to hire an expert, let them do it. The problem is that you need to be able to manage the person or people that you are having advise you. And they're going to see right through you if you don't know what you're doing. And they're going to tell you things that some are going to be honest, some are going to be dishonest, some just don't know. And so you have to learn the process. So you need to learn it yourself no matter what. You may not have to get the depth of knowledge that they know, but you need to know enough to ask the right questions and drive them in the right direction. Now, I have lots of people who work for me. I have lots of people who are experts. Some are employees, some are freelancers, some are agencies, but I got to know their business pretty well. because I got to be able to stay on top of them. And owning any business, a small art business included, you got to know these things. And so an expert might help you, but you got to know enough about it. You can't just, you can delegate, but you can't advocate. You've got to stay involved in the process. So the other thing is that really you got to go back to the root of all of this. Remember, anytime you want to do anything, you need to start with what is the end in mind. It's real easy to say, well, I want to hire an expert. Why do you want to hire an expert? What do you want to achieve? How much money do you want to make? What else is important other than money? What is it about reputation? Or what is it about your pricing? Or what is it about getting into better galleries? You know, these things matter too. They're not always directly about the money. And so first you got to start with, what do I want to accomplish? What's my timeline to get there? How much is it worth it to me? If I spend this money and it doesn't work, am I bankrupt? Am I out of money? What if this expert isn't any good? I hired an ad agency, no names. I hired an ad agency in another country. They were supposed to be one of the best in the world. Everybody was raving about them. I wrote them a very, very big check for a project that I was doing, and they completely bombed. They completely failed. I was completely disappointed because I really wanted it to work. And you know, sometimes these things happen. You know, they didn't have any experience in the thing I was trying to do, but they believed that their system would work for that. They were wrong. I was wrong. So anyway, that's the long and short of it. You've got to kind of know where you're going first, and then what you want to accomplish. So that's a long answer to a short question. Abedin, what's next?
The second question is from Gabriel from Lake St. Louis, Missouri. How to implement TikTok as a marketing tool?
How do I implement TikTok as a marketing tool? Well, Gabriel, you've stated this correctly. You see, all things that involve tactics are tools. And using TikTok as a marketing it is a tool, right? Using Instagram as a tool, using a magazine as a tool, using a website as a tool. Those are all tools. They're tactics. And if you were working on your car, let's assume you had some mechanical skill, which I don't have much of, you don't use a hammer to loosen a bolt. Why? Well, first off, you're going to ruin the bolt. You might break the bolt. You need the right tool, right? So you need somebody who's going to hand you the right tool, or you need to go find the right tool, the right socket or whatever. So imagine if you're watching trends and you're watching, and everybody out there in the world is using hammers to repair their cars. And it's like, everybody's doing it. I got to do it. Why? Because everybody's doing it. That's kind of how we think. It's very seductive. You want to do what everybody else is doing. So you start using a hammer, even though you don't need a hammer. The point being that you got to know what you need. We get seduced by things like TikTok and social media and Instagram and Reels and all the fun stuff, because we see these YouTube stars making millions, and you see TikTok stars making millions, you know, because they're just dancing, and they do it all the time. And what we don't see is that these kids are spending 8-10 hours a day, sometimes 7 days a week, writing, recording, creating their reels. And we don't see the struggle that they had to get there. And some of them didn't have a struggle. You know, what Mr. Beast does on YouTube takes a lot of time and a lot of writing and a lot of planning, and a lot of people to pull it off, and a lot of money, but he makes it look easy. But it's not easy, guarantee that. So a habit that we all have is to get seduced by shiny objects like TikTok. But first, you got to ask yourself, what needs to happen? It's kind of like what I was talking about before. Goes back to the idea of goals. What do I need to accomplish? What are my goals? What do I want TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram to do for me? And are they the right or the wrong tools to get the job done? Just, marketing, we all tend to go for what everybody else is doing. Remember Got Milk, and everybody started copying Got Milk? That whole campaign did not move the needle on milk sales. And everybody thinks it did, so they started doing, Got Pizza. The whole campaign was developed because they wanted to make the board of directors feel like they were doing something to move the needle, but it didn't work. And yet everybody copied it. It was unique. It was fun. Don't copy until you know why the copying, what you're copying, because there's more to it. Now, I have lots of big Instagram sites. Some of them have hundreds and thousands of followers. It's taken me a long time to get there. It's taken a lot of effort. My personal page is only about 17,000. My PleinAir Mag page is 120,000. My Realism Today page is 205,000. But my TikTok is still under 1,000. Even though I'm getting 30, 40,000 views, I'm not getting followers. But none of that matters unless you have a specific purpose. I have a specific purpose. I have a specific plan. I monitor metrics for a very specific reason. But you got to keep in mind that, when you see somebody that's got 100,000 followers, you go, I need 100,000 followers. Do you really? Why? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to turn it into money? Otherwise, it's just vanity metrics. Getting followers on social media is cool, but unless you're accomplishing a very specific purpose from that, and it might be branding, it might be awareness, it might be actual physical money, it might be finding ways to get email addresses. There's a lot of different things you can do, but you need to understand it first. So you need what I call a conversion plan. How do you get them to buy? Just getting out on TikTok isn't enough. You need to know what is the process. Now, you can easily do this on social media. Easily. It's simple. It's not easy. All right. I guess it's simply do it on social media, but it does require a plan and it requires a lot of work. Now, people don't usually give you money until you ask for the order. So if you're going to say, I want to make money selling paintings on TikTok, you got to figure out how to make it work, how to get them to the right place, how to make them come to you to a place where they can buy your painting, right? So there's a whole lot to that. But to answer your question, if you put the time aside daily, you come up with a compelling content and you start putting it out there. If it's good, it builds. And TikTok and Instagram and others have an algorithm. If they start seeing a lot of heat and a lot of activity, they're going to put it in more people in front of it because they want them to click on it too, because that increases their metrics. And so, you just got to get it out there. And there's lots of courses about how to sell on Instagram and TikTok. And I bought one of them once and it was kind of useless. And by the way, it's constantly changing. But, it's about frequency. It's about posting frequently. I post daily on TikTok, which are cuts from my Art School Live daily on YouTube. And we just cut them into 30-second reels or 1-minute reels. And then we put them up there and we put them everywhere. We repurpose them on Facebook. We repurpose them on Instagram and so on. We put them out on, everything, LinkedIn, et cetera. So, but if I were going to do it right for TikTok, if I had the time, I would do custom content specifically for TikTok with a very specific purpose in mind. That's not important to me right now, but that might be what you should do. Now, the other thing is, there's a very big possibility. This is going to sound crazy, but there's a big possibility TikTok's going to go away. How? Why? Because the U.S. government's trying to shut it down because it's sucking data from people, including you, and it's all going to China. I don't want to get into political discussions. I don't even understand it, but there's an awful lot of talk about shutting it down. There was talk before. It didn't happen. Part of it got sold, supposedly, but the data is still going in. So TikTok may not be the answer. And by the way, if you look back at MySpace, it was like the hottest thing and then it went away. It can happen. Now, maybe less likely to happen with something that strong, but there's going to always be something that'll replace it. There's always new shiny objects and new social media. There's some new ones that are coming out that are right around the corner. So define what you want to achieve, get exact detail as possible about what you want to achieve, what you stand for, what you want to be known for. And then once your strategy is determined, then you go to tactics. TikTok is a tactic. Okay, that is today's Art Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
All right. Well, I want to thank Thomas Jefferson Kitts. I want to remind you guys to come to the Plein Air Convention at pleinairconvention.com. That's coming up in May. Watercolor Live is coming up, and that is in January. It's going to be a way to change your watercolor performance, and you're going to do a great job with it. That's at watercolorlive.com. It's all online. We've got a worldwide audience. Those of you in the 120, 130, 190 countries that are listening to this, you should come. And you can watch it on replay if you can't watch it live. But, we have people in Australia watching at 4:00 in the morning. And, of course, great Christmas gifts, pleinairmagazine.com. Now, if you've not seen my blog on Sundays where I talk about life and art and crazy things, it's called Sunday Coffee. And you want to get it because I'm going to be doing some special Christmas stuff. At least I'm planning to, starting this weekend. And so you just go to coffeewitheric.com and hit the subscribe button. You'll get it automatically. Also, I'm on Facebook daily, 12 noon Eastern time. And I've got a different artist on every day. The school, it's called Art School Live is the name of the show. And we get people from all over the world. And we're getting a lot of views. We're about just under 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, just trying to get that last couple thousand in. Seems like it's really difficult, but we'll get there. And anyway, thanks for following me and for following me on Instagram at Eric Rhoads. And I'll see you around. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. And I want to thank you for your time today. And remember, it's a big world. Go paint it. Bye-bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.